Hi everyone, welcome to our session Hardening Your Azure Tenant.
Hi everyone.
My name is Mustafa Toroman. I work as a lead system engineer for a company of 20 partners. Here is my Twitter handle. If you need any kind of assistance, feel free to reach out. I'm also Azure MVP, very certified in Microsoft technologies, Microsoft certified trainer for many years, Microsoft VTSP, and so on.
Hi everyone. I'm a co-speaker, and my name is Sasha. I'm also an Azure MVP. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer as well, and also a certified Easy Council instructor. Mostly I do Azure and security, but also the other infrastructure as well. There's also my Twitter handle. As Mustafa said, please feel free to reach out if you need anything. Okay, so when we speak about cloud, and not just Azure cloud, we need to keep in mind that the cloud is the shared responsibility model. What does that mean? It means that both you and cloud provider share the responsibility for security. So the cloud provider takes care about physical security, that is the cameras, alarms, various fencing, and power, and two-factor and multi-factor authentication of personnel. It takes care of the infrastructure and operational security controls, and it does penetration testing and so on. But your part falls on the network, so on the virtual machines, on the subnets, on the virtual networks. So it's the analogy to your home. So your responsibility is to lock the door, while the door manufacturer has the responsibility to make the door very strong and foolproof.
Okay, so as Sasha mentioned, everything in cloud it has a shared responsibility model. So cloud provider takes care of one part of security and provides you features and options how to do the rest of the job yourself. So there's a lot of features in Azure that are specifically pointed to security. So many services are security only features, but that doesn't stop there. Basically, any Azure service that you open will have some kind of built-in security feature. So security doesn't stop on security services only, but actually reaches out across all Azure stack of services.
When we talk about security, the first thing that you encounter is identity security. So the identity security model, it's a very important one. Why? Because it all starts with the identity, at least in Azure. Why? Because you need your identity to log on to your Azure subscription. Your Azure subscription or multiple subscription are actually tied to your account, and your account is a very, very important thing. And afterwards, the Azure and Office 365 have the same Azure tenant, have the same identity management model, and you need to protect that as well. It is Microsoft or cloud providers' responsibility to make the identity model or tenant isolated from other users. The Azure is multi-tenant, but your responsibility is, for example, to make your tenant more secure by creating strong passwords, by implementing various security rules and features that our Azure is providing, like a PIM that we will address a little bit later. Not only providing strong passwords will be a great deal will bring a great deal of security to your accounts, but to your identities. But this is unfortunately not enough in our times. So we suggest that you use multi-factor authentication, which is free for certain numbers of administrators in your tenant, and which greatly increases the security of your identities, not just administrator, but every others. It adds another layer of security to your identity and actually gives another factor of authentication or different factor of authentication, and adds additional security or raises additional security to of your Azure. You will see also how this works. We have an example for that as well.
Yeah, and I would like to add, Sasha mentioned this MFA is a free feature for admins in Azure. Now, I heard a couple of people commenting that, okay, so I make all users admin and enable MFA. I don't think that you should ever even consider making all users admins in your tenant. That's like very bad idea. Now, how MFA actually works. So I have an example here. Sasha and I do a lot of sessions and conferences together. So I managed to get a hold of his password. He wasn't careful. He trusted me as his roommate and a friend. Never trust anyone, not even your friend. So I managed to grab one of his identities, but alas, this doesn't really help me much. Why? Sasha wasn't careful in this particular case and enabled me to get a hold of his password. But, okay,
And MFA can protect you from this kind of forensics as well.
Just let's see. No. Okay. Now, the issue with this is even Sasha was careless with his password, he still has MFA enabled, and he never leaves his phone out of the sight, like never. So even I got hold of his credentials, it doesn't help me much. There's still MFA option, and he just denied me authenticating with his account. So basically, even I have his username and password, it doesn't provide me anything. This is very good defense against phishing attacks, social engineering, and similar things. Even when user credentials are leaked, you still have options and you're still protected in some amount.
And I just want to add that I used the Microsoft Authenticator app on Android phone. You weren't able to see that, but the pop-up showed and asked if I just tried to log in. I pressed on denied, and then the login attempt was denied. And additionally, I want to say that this Microsoft Authenticator app actually works with other providers as well. So I'm using it, for example, for Amazon, for Firefox, for GitHub, and others as well. So it's free, and it raises the security very much. I suggest that you use that.
Okay, so next part is access policy and controls. I don't know how many of you actually used Azure a long time ago when it started, like 9, 8 years ago. It used very much different model. When you they call it classic now. That model didn't actually provide you much option when access policies and controls were in question. So basically, if you had a bunch of virtual machines in your subscription and wanted to give access to only certain number of VMs to certain user, you weren't able to do that. You actually had only one option to add that person as a co-admin in your Azure subscription. So basically, if you wanted to separate users and limit them to access that you have, you actually had to create multiple subscriptions and keep users separated by subscription level. That isn't really practical and creates a bunch of problems. Now, what new model of Azure resource model introduced was role-based access control. role-based access controls give you multiple layer of options and features, how you can enable access into what you can give access users to. So let me jump into Azure Portal now and try to give you a couple of examples. So if I go to my subscription, any of them, I have access control here, and here I can see what kind of role assignments are here actually. So I'm an owner of my subscription, but I have another user that is a reader and can only access reading resources. It cannot affect them in any way. It cannot create anything in the subscription. Can just observe what is in there. Now, with the add option, I have role assignment, and I can select between bunch of different predefined roles, or I can create my own custom role and give certain user access only limited by the role. I can say also which user I'm adding. I can add a group of users and so on. Now this is for subscription, but I can go a bit down and give a user access on a resource group level. Now if I do same thing, I have role assignments, I can add any user, I can give them any kind of role, and this will apply only to resource group in question. So if I under my subscription have like hundreds of resource groups, this user will be limited to only accessing this resource group. He will not be aware of the rest of the resource group under that subscription. And I can go even deeper and go to only certain resource and say, okay, this resource I want to give the user access and allow them to only see this certain resource, and he can manage and do operations that his current role allows him only on this certain resource.
What else do we have? We have a very interesting feature that is unfortunately only available in premium tiers of Azure AD, and that it's privileged identity management. We have just-in-time access for the virtual machines that you will see later. PIM allows you to enable just-in-time access for the privileged groups of users, like global administrator, exchange administrator, billing administrator, and other privileged users. What does it mean? It means that even if you have you have the role as an administrator, you become eligible. That means that you have to request access actually to enforce and consume your role. By doing that, the system follows you what you're doing. So someone has to approve you, or if it's automatically approved, then it's written down, then it's logged, and actually it's tracked down who did what and when. And it's time limited as well. And by time limiting your actions and actually forcing you to reapply for the role, keeps your tenant more secure.
Okay, so now we have a bit of a data is always an issue. Whenever we discuss IT and security, it always comes to data. So when we talk about Azure, you have certain amount of control over it. So you control which location data will be stored in. You select the location of the data center and the data location of the replication center. You also have control of data. You can see you can give authentication, control who can access what. You can add just-in-time access, like Sasha mentioned a moment ago. You have also there's a control over deletion of data. Once you decide to leave data center, your data will be eventually destroyed according to certain procedures and standards. And also there's a very good encryption key management. You have options to use your own encryption keys and make sure your data is encrypted by your standards, not just Microsoft provides you with industry-leading standards, but you have control to oversee that process and use your own standards, in fact.
The next thing in securing your Azure tenant would be to protect your data while it's resting on the virtual machines, or while it's resting on the storage that you have, or while in use in applications. You have several different types and models of securing your data, whether it's a SQL Server transparent data encryption, or BitLocker, or EFS at the lowest level, or at the storage BitLocker as well, and the other things. So the point is that each of the things adds a layer of security to your data, and in the sum of all security features turned on greatly increases your overall Azure security. And speaking of security at rest, the next thing is encryption in transit. Azure is also a very versatile here and has the options to encrypt in transit, whether it's HTTPS for storage. So when you share your storage or when you access your storage, then the secure way to access it is available. Whether you are accessing applications that you're running in Azure, HTTPS is also there. And the TLS 1.1 now, that is most secure protocol right now, it's used even if you have a web client or server running some pages natively on IIS as well. What else do we have?
Okay, so let's stick to data encryption for a while now and stick to that. Even as mentioned, everything is encrypted at rest. You still have options to do it yourself, and to a certain amount to actually control the process. So, for example, if we go to SQL databases in Azure, we can see that I have one single database here. In the security section, we have transparent data encryption. Now, there's a very simple way to actually encrypt data right here. The only thing I need to do is say on, click save, and a couple of seconds later, my database will be encrypted. Encryption is in progress. It will take a couple of minutes. It actually depends on the size of the database. This isn't a very big one, but it still takes some time to encrypt. Now, let's, for example, take storage account. If I go to storage account, open any of them, again, I will have encryption options here. Now, storage is encrypted by default. As we mentioned, all of the services are encrypted at rest, but I have option here to use my own key. So I can either enter key URI and provide it here, or I can select directly from the key vault by selecting key vault and then selecting encryption key placed in that key vault. Now, when it comes to virtual machine, the thing is a little bit different. We can see, if we go to disks, we can see all the disks listed in our subscription, and then we can see the encryption status right here. So in this particular case, we can see that disk is not encrypted and that we need to do something to fix that. Now, in order to encrypt those disks, it's not available to Portal. We actually need to do a little bit of PowerShell. So what this script does, it's actually, let's run it and I'll explain while it runs. So the script, what the script does is it selects virtual machine resource group. It will take some time. Okay, so it selects virtual machine group, virtual machine name, resource group for the key vault name, then it collects the key vault, selects the disk encryption key vault URL, and then key vault resource ID, provides that in the single command for set Azure IRM VM disk encryption extension, and uses my own key stored in the key vault to actually encrypt the data. Okay, this will actually take a while, so we'll circle back to this and continue in a bit. Sasha.
Secure networking options. What are the secure networking options in Azure? There are several. And first of all, virtual networks actually connect our Azure resources to outer world. And first of all, we need to secure them by using network security groups or firewall rules. And additionally, if the traffic goes out of the Azure, or if it communicates with other virtual networks in different regions, for example, if we set it up that way, we can use that. We can use a VPN or virtual private networking device. And for the highly secure and dedicated connection to our on-premises site, we can use ExpressRoute that uses a private dedicated line that can be encrypted, and it's highly reliable. And it costs much, but it also gives you the most secure way to connect your Azure resources to on-premises resources. What additional? Sorry?
And the fastest way.
Oh yes, and the fastest way. Also, the costs are also higher, but it's the most secure way. And what about the things that we actually don't have the control over? Or limited control. We have a distributed denial of access protection. Actually, it was here always, but we can now see when we have the second tier. The second tier of DDoS gives us a little bit of more functionality if we want to, but it protects us from the outer world and the outer attacks, and actually all our inside resources are, for example, like VMs, are protected from this kind of attacks by selecting DDoS. So
the central place for security in Azure is actually Azure Security Center. It tries to unify all those security features in a single place. The good thing is it's still in the process of building up. There's basically new functionalities and features every couple of weeks, and we can see much improvements over time. Actually, this is not only Azure Security Central place. Recently, Azure Sentinel was introduced that actually extends these capabilities of Azure Security Center to on-prem devices and so on. But Azure Security Center is a very good place to start and gives you a lot of options and basically gives you a recommendation on how you should proceed and how you can build your Azure tenant very strong. Okay, before we jump here, let's see what happened to our PowerShell script. So it completed. So if I go back to Azure portal and refresh here, I can see that encryption is now enabled. Now I don't have that problem anymore. My encryption is enabled. And I don't have to worry about my disk. Why is this a good thing? Basically, if you give an admin access and he has access to a virtual machine, basically he could export that virtual machine and use the exported disk to restore it on-prem and have access to any kind of data that is stored in that disk. So basically, with enabling disk encryption, we are ensuring that this disk you won't be able to restore it without having a proper key that's used to actually encrypt it. Go to Azure Security Center, and here we can see a lot of interesting dashboards. So this place actually provides you with different security standards. For example, we have ISO 27001 for For example, it shows that I have 7 on 22 pass controls. If I go in here, I can see recommendations, and I can see actually what needs to be fixed in order to actually satisfy all the criteria of this. So if I go to, for example, to ISO 27001, I can see which of the criteria are satisfied and which still needs to be addressed, and what needs to be fixed inside my subscription to actually possess all the criteria to actually pass such a certification. We can see here also a lot of coverage. For example, we can see what resources I have and what are the coverages of these subscriptions currently. We can see a security score for different kind of resources, what needs to be addressed on the compute, what needs to be addressed on the networking stack, for the data and storage, for the identity and access, and so on. We have again regulatory compliance. We can see all those interesting criteria that we need to pass. For the resource security hygiene, we have a lot of recommendations. We can see what needs to be addressed inside of our subscriptions to actually satisfy and improve our security. What I really like, one of my favorite features in the Azure Security Center is just-in-time VM access. So what it actually does, it gives you option to limit the access to virtual machines. Now, having RDP access or SSH or whatever you use for managing virtual machine, having that access over public IP address is always a bad thing. So basically, if you enable such an access and leave it wide open, unsecured, you will be definitely hacked. For example, I left one of the virtual machines, just created very weak password, and I left it open and on the RDP just to see what happens. In less than a month, I have 60,000 attempts of brute force attacks on that single virtual machines. What bad guys do, they basically scan the network, and once they notice that there's an RDP port open, they're going to try to hit it. So enabling the public access to management ports is never a good thing. It's much better to remove that, try to VPN to that virtual network, and then access your virtual machines. But it's not always an option. Sometimes you have to do it. And in that case, you can use VM access to just-in-time access to secure that kind of access. So if I go to recommendation, I can see a bunch of virtual machines here that are not enabled. So I have some of them configured, some of them are not. So let's just go to this one, and I can say enable JIT on this virtual machine. It will ask me what kind of port. Let's say I remove the rest of them. I will just leave 3389. And I'll say, okay, save. Now, this virtual machine is actually added to the list of the configured virtual machines. So if I go there and I say, okay, I want to request access, it will give me option to say from where. So I will select my IP address. I will enable access on my IP address, and I can limit for the amount of time I'm going to enable it. So, and I say open ports. Now this virtual machine will be enabled for 1 single hour. Now I can RDP to this virtual machine from my IP address only for a limited amount of time. Once this time is expired, I won't be able to access it anymore, and I would need to go to Azure portal, request that access again, and able to actually access it. This amount of time is nowhere near to actually say so much about security that we'd like to, but I hope you have found that this session interesting, and that we at least gave you an option to look into and gave you some idea where to start on Azure security.
Thank you for following us, and if you implement just one of the the security features that we showed you, we are very thankful.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.